So now we're going to go through the process of capturing the VHB, or volume home block, of the hard drive onto a floppy so that we could re-put it onto another hard drive or do other experiments with it. So this is what that procedure is going to look like. It's mostly experimental. It's something that I've used in the past as a diagnostic, or to get a hard drive that's ready to be bootable by another machine, similar to the UNIX PC, called the Convergent Technologies Mighty Frame. But could just consider this more experimental and understanding a little bit deeper about how the UNIX PC is interacting with the hard drive at this particular level, and how to access a workable version of Unix at this level. So hopefully you'll find some other application that's similar to this that's helpful to you. Anyway, and again, you know, we're dealing with a 30-year-old machine, so this is all just vintage excitement anyway, right? All right, here we go. Vintage excitement. So I've created the foundation set from the images from the IMD files that I've linked below in this video, in the description, below this video in the description. And I've actually used DOS Machine to create floppy disks from that. I should have another blog post there listed that shows how I went about doing that. But basically we're inserting now foundation set disk 2, and we're going to boot from that and then move on to disk 3. So here we go. Disk 2 is now in. And it's booting from floppy. I should point out that I actually have a hard drive connected to this machine. At the time, there was no loader or kernel, Unix kernel or operating system on the hard drive, just VHB or volume home block after it was initialized. I showed a different video where that initialization process happens. Okay, so as standard for the foundation disk set, we are being asked to insert disk 3 of 12 because it requires the rest of that in order to get to functioning Unix. But we're going to have to trick it when we get there, so watch carefully. So we're going to take disk 2 out. We're going to insert disk 3, and here's what we will see. By the way, I'm working with copies, not originals, because the next disk we're actually going to modify. So be sure you're working with a copy and not an original that you want to keep for historical purposes. All right, here we go. Disk 3, foundation set disk 3, copy. Okay, now look at this very carefully. This is actually normal for the foundation disk 3 process. Part of the install program says, hey, you want to erase your hard disk? Do you really want to continue? Yes or no? All right. But at this point, this is where it gets interesting, because we're not going to say either yes or no. Instead, we're going to hit two very specific keys on the keyboard, and that's going to be the shift and the delete, or escape. So we're going to hold down the shift and hit the escape. Now I'm going to move the keyboard down while I do that so that you can actually see the screen and see what happens when I do that. Alright, here we go. Holding down shift and hitting the delete escape key. Now. Alright, did you see that? Now we actually have a Unix prompt. And while we don't have the blinking cursor like we do with the full Unix PC operating system, we do have that. So if I were to hit enter a few times, we'd see that we actually have a responding prompt. At this point now, we should be able to access the base Unix operating system and do a directory or listing of the files that are on the floppy disk right now. So here we go, doing that. And there it is. This is what is on the floppy disk. Now, I meant to start with a fresh copy because I've done some experimentation here before, and I actually added this directory. So forgive me for that. I'm going to remove the directory, so you can just pretend you didn't see that. Yes. It's as if I can't do that in Unix. I have to do something else. Ah, RD. Yes, there it is. Oh, and it's not found because we're using a base version of Unix. Isn't that fun? All right, anyway. We're just going to move on. I'm not going to delete it and re-add it because I guess I don't have the tools for that on this base disk. Uh-oh. What's in there? Let's see what's in there. Alright, nothing is in there. Now, I actually lied to you. Because I said that this was the basic standard factory system foundation install disk 3. And it's not. And we couldn't do this if it were. And here's what would be missing. The DD command. What I've done on this image is I've actually copied the DD program, the Unix DD program from the main operating system back when I had this thing booted to a full operating system, and I copied it to bin, and something that is there that's not usually there on this disk is the DD command. It's not there by default from the factory, so I've added that. Okay, so now that I've done that, let's see where we are. I'm going to go back to VHBS, which is the custom directory that I created beforehand to hold the VHB in. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm going to verify that I'm there in the VHB directory. Very good. So now, I am going to actually copy the VHB, or the volume home block, from the hard drive into a file in this directory on the floppy. So here's what that looks like. We're going to use the DD command, and thanks to the fact that I put it on this disk, it's now there. And the input file is going to be DEV for device RFP000. Now, I don't know exactly what the FP stands for, but I know that the R stands for raw. You don't just want to use FP000, signifying a section of the hard disk that doesn't exist. You want to use RFP. This is basically saying, hey, it's the whole hard disk, starting with sector 0, block 0, so on and so forth. And again, those that understand Unix can correct me a little bit better here, so feel free to do that. But this is the device that you want if you want to actually get to the volume home block of your hard drive. Alright, so then the output file is going to be a file that I name in this current directory. So I'm just going to call it VHB s.st251, because that's the model of the hard drive I happen to be working with. This is a Seagate ST251, and I formatted that as such, initialized it as such, is what the UNIX PC calls that. .dd to indicate that this is that was the method that I used to create the file. That's my naming convention. So if you have your own, of course, use your own. Or if you don't like mine, use your own. Anyway, so now I'm just going to hit enter on this, and no, I'm not. I lied. There's one more thing I need to do. I don't want to copy all that into a big file because it's not going to fit on this floppy. I need to limit this. And I'm limiting this to 8 blocks of data. 8 blocks of data. Now, in this case, a block is 512 bytes. So we now have 4,096 bytes. Okay. So, if I hit enter on this, then we should see 8 blocks of data copied from the hard drive to the file I'm creating here. So let's just do that now and see what happens. Eight records in, 8 records out. Absolutely fantastic. Let's see what we have. Beautiful. All right, now, the mistake that I made in previous times that I did this is I missed a very, very crucial step. What I did in the past was I just hit exit, shut down the machine, and then guess what? This file wasn't there anymore. It's like it had disappeared. All right. Well, on this vintage of machine and this vintage of Unix, there's this magic thing that says, hey, really write the file to the disk. Don't just tell me that you did, and wait to do it later when, you know, there's enough batch memory or something. Some of you that know this vintage of Unix can explain to me how exactly that works, but we'll get there later. This is what I missed doing last time. Sync. Very, very important. It basically says, hey, you know those files you were waiting to write to the hard drive and you said you did, but you didn't yet? Write them now. That's my interpretation of that. You probably have a better one. And I actually hit this a couple of times for good measure. How many times is it necessary? I don't know. Is it necessary more than once? Probably. But, you know, when we went through all this trouble, we kind of want to do this right and actually get it to work. So I'm going to hit this 3 or 4 times. Oh, I got a little ahead of myself. It's not going to recognize that. Oh, wait, it is. Are we done? Good. Doesn't recognize that. Of course not. All right. I think now it's finally there. It's not. I'm not gonna know for sure until I shut down the machine and reboot to this point to see if the file's actually there. But I really believe that it actually is gonna last this time. So there we go. Anyway, that's how this procedure is performed. At this point, I'm gonna do an exit and shut down the machine, and hope for the best. So hopefully you found some of this helpful and enjoy. Thanks for watching.